When I was a kid, I know I'm starting another video of a story, just bear with me. I lived off of Tomb Raider, especially the classic era and later the Legend trilogy. This was before I became super aware of the internet, online reviews, content creators, and the general consensus people would come to from all of the above. I bring this up because there was one Tomb Raider game that I loved as a kid and still enjoy to this day, that being The Angel of Darkness. When I first played it, I didn't know it was the worst reviewed and one of the worst selling games in the series at the time. I didn't know it was rushed and filled with glitches. I didn't know about Eidos's impossible deadlines as a publisher and how the devs ended up taking the fall for the game's failure, losing access to the franchise they invented and eventually going out of business a few years later. I just had a game in front of me that I enjoyed. And this has happened a few times in my life, as I was a pretty offline kid for the early years of my childhood. I think I only started watching YouTube in 2009 or 2010, and even then, it was just specific Let's Plays, so I wouldn't hear negative things about other games, as they were usually just talking about the game they were playing. So I thought most people probably enjoyed that Tomb Raider game then, same as I assumed people actually knew what Deep Labyrinth on the Nintendo DS was, same as I thought people liked Lightning and Final Fantasy XIII by extension. I was honestly baffled when I first got curious enough to look up a speedrun on The Angel of Darkness, just for it to be a glitch fest with the runner joking about the lack of quality control in the game, finding next to nothing on Deep Labyrinth except an old IGN review, and that Final Fantasy XIII was branded the worst RPG ever made. Although as an adult, I can absolutely understand these perspectives, even if I don't agree with them. Okay, minus the FF13 one, the hate it gets is excessively exaggerated, and I'm glad the internet moved on from that perspective in recent years. But at the age I was back then, I was a lot more stubborn and instead played them more often. Talked about them to my friends more. Heck, I brought my DS to school a few times just to show people Deep Labyrinth. You know, on a DS Lite, the really tiny ones that no one could see the screen on anyway. This push to promote these games I loved that others didn't was what even led me to make this YouTube channel in the first place. The very first video I ever uploaded on this channel was a silly Final Fantasy XIII video I recorded off my phone to show something I found funny about it 12 years ago. The reason I bring all this up is because nowadays, I'm not so quick to immediately dismiss a low-reviewed game when I see one. Yeah, not everything with a subpar score is something I'll actually look into, as there are some genuinely bad products out there, but if it's something that still looks interesting despite the reception, I might give it a shot anyway. Heck, I love the games made by Furyu, and I don't think any of their games score higher than like a 5 out of 10 for most people, but I always find them charming nonetheless. For the Five Nights at Freddy's fans watching this, you might already know where I'm going with this. Security Breach, the next game on my list of FNaF games to cover, has a reputation I was completely aware of. It was impossible to avoid it even back when I didn't care for the franchise. It's littered with problems that received very little post-launch support to correct, had a now infamously mishandled development both on Steelwall being inexperienced with non-VR titles and Scott Cawthon failing to properly supply the team with all the details they needed to bring the story to life. Add in a bunch of slapped-on mechanics to try and add depth, a new band of threats that they felt the need to explain, and it was always going to be a risky venture, even if it somehow worked out in the end. But I've also seen those who either like the game, or like aspects of it at the least, and I can't help but resonate with those who feel that way, not because of my own feelings on the game, but because of my childhood where I felt I went through a similar circumstance, fighting to defend something most people saw as undefendable. So I wanted to go into FNaF Security Breach with this open mind, to brush aside its history and its legacy and take it as it is now. This doesn't mean I'm going to give the game a free pass, but I've personally never been a fan of overly negative videos, especially reviews, so when there's something I like, I will point it out. That said, this isn't the only game on the table today. Security Breach is first, but there's also its DLC, Ruin, and the most recent entry as of this video, Secret of the Mimic. Each one having a more positive reception than the last, and I want to see how Steelwall grew throughout these titles. You know the drill at this point, I haven't watched any theory videos, so tried to figure things out as I went along, so don't expect my interpretation of the story to be necessarily accurate, just how I took it from what was presented. Jump scares will be toned down as usual too. The games we're covering have more actual on-screen stories as opposed to the much more subtle older releases, so I will talk story as and when it is appropriate in the video and not just at the very end. With that all under the way, let's begin. Oh, okay. Definitely a new beginning kind of intro, but a nice way of showing off the new main four and also showing that somehow people just got over the whole child murdering incidents in the past. Our new four are two familiars and two originals. Chica is back because she knows she's the best of the OG four, and Freddy is here because he's kinda has to be for the franchise's namesake. That said, this game is, I think, the first time since the original that he's had any real importance. I mean, in 2, he's no different than most of the others, same with 3 and the Phantoms. In 4, he mirrors Foxy. It's just part of the minigame collection and sister location and isn't unique at all in Pizza Sim. Freddy hasn't had a standout character since FNaF 1. I haven't played World or the AR games, so can't include them, but to jump the gun a little, Glamrock Freddy here is kind of the crux of the entire experience, and I genuinely appreciate Steel Rule's decision to give him such a bigger spotlight this time. As to the other two, Montgomery the Alligator and Roxanne Wolf are the replacements for Bonnie and Foxy respectively. Monty and Roxy for short. Monty is kind of whatever to me design-wise. I don't think he's one of the better ones, but he certainly isn't bad per se. Roxy, however, I think is cool. I'm always a sucker for any punk-like vibe from anyone, and she serves that pretty nicely. And although she only really gets like 1 or 2 scenes to show it early on, I like that Roxy has a very distinct personality with a noticeable flaw off the bat. She's excessively self-conscious and is constantly trying to convince herself she's the best around to mask it. In fact, all 4 of them are more individualized this time around. Not that the old ones were lacking this, I mean Foxy hating bright lights and being watched told its own character story, but it's more overt here. As for the game itself, we play as Gregory, who teams up with Glamrock Freddy to explore the new pizzeria. Oh, sorry, did I say pizzeria? No, this is much bigger. So much so, they made up a whole new word for it, the Pizzaplex. Although you're not informed of this at all until very late into the game, Gregory here is trying to investigate a mystery involving missing kids because holy shit, Fazbear Entertainment really can't help themselves getting involved in children vanishing, can they? In a change of pace I actually kind of liked, you're not a night guard this time. In fact, one of the threats you need to avoid is the one lone night guard in this monolithic structure, Vanessa, who Gregory suspects as well, presumably because of the aforementioned missing kids in a building she works in just made Greg connect the dots a little, even if it's assumptive. But considering he's a literal child, I can see the logic that would get him there. I'm saying all this because the game never explains why he doesn't trust her to begin with, and drops the subject entirely once he's validated later on. More on that in a bit though. The game would probably be best described as a sandbox that just makes sure you're steered down the main path in the earlier stages to make sure you get a lay of the land, so you're not in any real fear of ever getting lost. Although there are some loose Metroidvania elements in it too, such as picking up new abilities or key items and backtracking through areas to open up new paths with them, I say loose as it's extremely basic and still pretty fixed for the most part. You can navigate just as Greg, or you can hop inside Freddy and walk around as the robot for a while. It makes you safe from almost all threats while you're inside, but to balance it out, you only have so much battery in it, and once it's done, Freddy has to recharge so you're kicked out. The threats are effectively anything that isn't Freddy, from the other animatronics that are instructed to just look for you by the Night Guard, but instead will kill you on sight, or the actual Night Guard herself, Vanessa, but you don't really see her too much, so don't worry too much about her, it's mostly the robots. The game at this point is sort of comparable to Alien Isolation, just with a lot less tension and a lot more things that can instantly kill you. What I mean is, both have manual saving be the only way to save, but making them only appear in set spots and take time to access once you're in front of one. This is to prevent you saving too close to an unwinnable situation by making you spend a bit of time to make sure the coast is clear. Both have one big threat that you can distract but is always seeking you, and if they find you, they're faster than you, so you'll have to think fast to survive. Unfortunately, the comparisons kinda end there though. Alien Isolation gives you the tools to help turn the tide more, whilst not making any individual tool too powerful to kill all the horror, and this game kinda just cheats. Scattered just about everywhere are security bots. If they find you, they'll make a loud noise. What should happen is that the main threat starts heading into your location upon hearing this alarm. What actually happens is the animatronics are teleported to your position, undermining any potential strategies that could be made from something making a loud noise for you. Chica in particular killed me a couple times because I'd get spotted by a security bot and suddenly there she is! This is in of itself wouldn't be too much of a problem, and to be honest, for a good chunk of the game, I don't think it really is one. But considering the nature of how you save in this game, those limited save spots mixed with insta-killing teleporting threats quickly demolish any aspect of the horror, because you end up just doing the same sequences several times over if you get unlucky.
Freddy, I found the free gift! It's a crappy Mr. Hippo fridge magnet? Lame.
I am sorry, Gregory. I am truly sorry.
The heck is their problem with Mr. Hippo? He's the best! Anyway, even before you get the real defense tools, you start with a camera system like the old games. When you access it, it lets you pick through a few of the local cameras to get a feel of where everything is, and if you're hiding, when you might be safe. I didn't find a need to use it all the time in this gargantuan children's entertainment pizza place, but I appreciated its inclusion honestly. Sometimes it was nice when I could hear something thumping around but couldn't precisely tell what. I won't explain every area in the game as that'd take forever, but I do want to talk about the first real level in the game as it's one of my favourites and introduces another element to the game's design that lingers in the background for the whole run, that being the timer. The first area you go to is the daycare, which is a huge indoor play park. You know, the ones that used to be in the back of a McDonald's like 20 odd years ago and now don't exist anywhere. Those ones. Here we meet Sun, who gives us a warm welcome and a simple warning. He'll have fun and play with you as long as the lights stay on. If the lights go out, the less friendly Moon will come and will kill on sight. What ends up making this whole section really fun is the cat and mouse you basically get to play in an actual play park. You get to wander around a little first before the lights go off so you can figure out where the generators are and maybe plot out how you'll get to them in a hurry when the lights do go off. The only thing stopping it from being perfect is, well, sometimes Moon gets a little stuck. Once the lights are back on, Sun kicks you out and alerts everyone that you're there. I didn't realize Freddy was right next to me when the next sequence started and got destroyed by Moon suddenly after a tutorial prompt. What? Okay, I think something didn't work as intended here too, but to explain how it usually goes down, there is a clock per se throughout the game that only moves when the plot, up until it reaches 5 minutes till the next hour. Once it's on that last 5 minutes, Moon is out and coming for you. Hiding in Freddy won't save you either from him. You have to hop into a recharge station. Cool idea, however the recharge station are always super close by, so the actual fear of death is non-existent unless you miss something like I did the first time. Here we also get a teaser someone in a bunny suit, so you know there's another human wandering around yet too, ending the whole chapter. Unfortunately, nothing thereafter quite catches up into this first chapter, but I still enjoyed most of them. Each chapter kind of works in this pattern thereafter. You enter as the hour turns, explore a level with a unique animatronic, get the ability to proceed further into the Pizzaplex. Once you go to leave, it becomes 5 minutes to the hour. You hide for a minute, move on to the next chapter. When the game gets to 6 AM, you can end it there if you don't care about endings. Once you're done with the daycare, you get your map, and have I mentioned this place is fucking huge yet? The map in this game isn't exactly the best for an area so expansive, but I wouldn't say it's the absolute worst map system either. It's more just limited for how much information you're given, and the legend doesn't work. So like the cameras, you'll probably find yourself not checking it too much after a while. Each chapter, or hour to be more specific, tends to be focused on a specific animatronic. We already talked about Sun and Moon from the Midnight chapter. I went down instead of up first, so my 1 AM threat was Chica, which involved me making her a pizza at one point. At the end of this chapter, the game kind of spoils who the mysterious bunny is immediately. The bunny is called Vanny. Vanny? It's Vanessa, the night guard. It's literally Vanessa and Bunny slapped together for the name. Vanny works different from the animatronics as well. She just knows where you are and will slowly advance to your position. She's basically designed to just keep you moving during all of like 2 sections she shows up in. After that, my 2 AM was Roxy focused. We don't get on her race course yet, but we do get a pretty fun, if simple minigame where Roxy and Monty are alternating doors that you have to shock while you have to keep finding Freddy on the cameras to open doors to him. It's very easy, so it doesn't really hold up to any office work micromanaging from the old games, but I still had fun. Special shout out to the parts and service section though. I grew up with Doctor Who. I know a weeping angel mechanic when I see one, and it's never not extremely unnerving in any game it shows up in. Actually, scratch that. This had me on the edge of my seat. I was the most paranoid I'd been with this series since FNaF 1. I love weeping angels, and I also hate them because of what that episode of Doctor Who did to me back in June of 2007. I was 8 years old, and they scared the crap out of me. I had nightmares that night, and anytime I see an equivalent even 19 years later, it still unsettles me, and Steel Wool did a fantastic Weeping Angel setup here. Tight corridors that require you to turn back to press buttons, a bunch of broken robots so you don't know which ones are the active threats until you turn away and then back to figure out which ones have moved. The stomping you hear when you can't see them but they're coming for you. Oh my goodness gracious, the deep sigh of relief I took when I got out of there could be felt across the neighborhood. I fucking love Weeping Angels as a horror fan, but I fucking hate Weeping Angels as human beings. They're right up there with dolls and mannequins as far as my horror kryptonite goes. To give an actual criticism, you have to play Simon Says a couple times in the game to repair and later upgrade Freddy, and not only are they about as fun as any Simon Says game like this, it also makes very little sense if you fail. Freddy says the maintenance makes him not act like himself, but apparently that translates to if you screw up, he'll kill you, and I think for a de-stress, it shouldn't have been that, just a slap on the wrist and some flavor text at most. There is a shift soon after this, however. Once you get to 4 AM, the game gives you the option to get an actual defense against the animatronics. Either a camera to temporarily stun them with a flash, or a gun. If you can believe it, I picked the gun, and it's way too strong for this kind of game. Any tension or horror the game had up to this point honestly fades almost completely the moment you pick up this toy laser gun. It auto recharges, and it's one shot to stun most threats. Need I say more? Also, shout out to this dumbass scene, just in case you somehow didn't figure out who Vanny was.
Freddy, that rabbit lady's in a secret room above Blast. It looks like a hideout. I think her name is... Vanny?
Vanny. It is very similar to Vanessa. And also Bunny. That cannot be a coincidence.
Remember when this series had subtlety? Anyway, after this point, you're effectively in the cleanup part of the game. The other 3 animatronics need to be defeated and each have effective boss fight challenges. I honestly love that the game doesn't spell out how to deal with them either. You have to just explore sometimes to figure this out. Chica's boss fight is in the kitchen, but you aren't told that, nor that you need to get something from the bowling alley first. You have to just go find all this based on clues left throughout the adventure on how she operates. The only thing holding this part of the game back from being truly fantastic is the sheer size of the Pizzaplex. It's around this time that you start to feel how long you're running sometimes just to get from one place to the next, and it gets rather dull before long. Once you beat an animatronic, they're not gone either. You steal a part of them for Freddy, which equates to relatively basic upgrades. Chica loses her voice, so Freddy can open a couple doors on voice command, for example, but now whenever she's looking for you, she won't be speaking and looks a lot creepier. There is one more enemy to encounter this side of 6 AM that's exclusive to the West Arcade and doesn't care for the Faz gun. The DJ, a genuinely colossal spider-like machine that has an absolutely banging theme. Of all the animatronics we break, Roxy was the only one I kinda felt bad for. Ignoring her kinda humorous downfall, you literally steal her eyes for an upgrade. You know, the animatronic that has self-esteem issues and we blinded her. Are we the baddies? When you finally make it to 6, you can just leave and get the bad ending, or you can stay and watch the game get a lot worse very suddenly. You can also choose to specifically pursue Vanny, but I didn't go for this in the end as I'd already spent a lot of time on this game. The biggest thing is, for some reason, all the save points deactivate minus a new one in the middle of everything. So any advancements you make in the story from this point on, and there's a fair bit for the record, needs to be done in huge chunks without checkpoints. Remember the insta-killing machines that can teleport? There were times where it was entirely out of my hands, even with the gun and camera, whether I lived or died, and my punishment was losing a lot of work, sometimes hours at a time. If the game ended at 6 AM, I'd have come away saying the game as a whole has problems, but I ultimately had a more positive than negative time with it. But it doesn't, and the final act of the game is honestly exhausting for all the wrong reasons. You know the map layout at this point, you know the enemy, you know what you need to do. Doesn't mean I want to do it 6 or 7 more times thanks to a random Chica warp. And what's your reward for all of this? An honestly terrible final act. Which is such a damn shame to me. I genuinely liked this game for the most part, but this final act kills so much of its momentum. I also don't get why pursuing Vanny or looking for the truth have to be so isolated. If you go for the latter, like I did, Vanny ceases to exist for the entire rest of the game. She was barely in to begin with. If you go for Vanny, you won't find the truth. These two threads should have been sewn together to make a more cohesive story. In fact, I mentioned earlier that Gregory is here to find out what happened to the missing kids. Do you want to know when this is actually first brought up?
Freddy, if I leave now, nothing will change, will it? There will be more disappearances.
When you're about to leave? Where was this earlier in the game? You can find logs and hints of the bigger picture before this, sure, but we aren't given a motive for why Gregory is here personally until this very moment. And whilst I'm on things I didn't particularly like, who designed this maze game? You can't even see what the buttons are doing, and the camera somehow makes even less sense. I tried this for way too long before giving up and finding a guide. I'm sure you can figure it out, but this was just wasting my time after a while. At least Monty's defeat was satisfying to make up for it. Unfortunately, the pain doesn't stop because the final boss is also terrible. There's a big blob of tentacles in Funtime Freddy's face, so this is probably what is somehow still left of Ennard post-Pizza Sim, and at the bottom is a boss fight against fucking Springtrap again, and surprise surprise, he still doesn't talk. Hopefully the third movie will give me that at least. I appreciate they kept it on theme that he once again gets beaten down with fire, but this boss fight is dancing between 3 cameras waiting for Afton to go to it and put his hand on a screen. Then you burn him. Repeat until boredom. You don't get any indication of how close you are to winning. He stands around doing nothing for minutes on end. Freddy is glitchy as hell and will randomly run out of power with no warning. Whatever the fuck the tentacle monster is sometimes just gets you, and if I'm honest, I still don't know what triggers that thing to kill you. It's a boring ass fight that takes forever, barely works, and can get lost instantly whenever the game feels like it. If you lose, you gotta do the whole stretch back to it before you can even try it again. The final act of this game is so disappointing to me. Although I had the odd hiccup, I genuinely had a pretty good time with this game up till this point. After that, it was just problem after problem after frustration after frustration. I sat through it after about an hour or two of trying, but it was not fun at all. Word to the wise, just abuse Freddy's hitbox to hard block an animatronic and hide to the side of the middle cam so you can try and avoid the thing from above whilst watching Afton. Freddy and Gregory then run for their lives while Springtrap gets yoinked. Did they get out? God knows, I only got the 2-star ending. Yeah, like other FNaF games, lore hunting can lead to getting more out of the endings, but for me, I got enough out of it and I was ready to move on. That's Security Breach. It's an interesting game, but not always for the right reasons. It has some really stellar moments, but when the quality dips, it plummets, which I feel diluted the entire experience. I don't have it in me to hate this game though. Like I keep saying, it was mostly a positive adventure, but I digress. Eventually there was a free DLC story added to the game called Ruin. News clearly got out about the place as the entire Pizzaplex has fallen apart now. Considering how badly destroyed everything is, I'd have assumed a number of years have passed since Security Breach, but no. Gregory doesn't sound a day older when we get to him, so this is probably at most a year later. We're playing as another child out to solve the mystery though, as Gregory is missing, being taken by something within the dilapidated building and held under Roxy's Raceway, which was where our final boss fight took place last time. We're Cassie instead, who came here after receiving a message from Gregory to come here. Ruin, in contrast to the previous adventure, is far more linear. You're not in a sandbox to freely run around, it's a set sequence of challenges you play exactly as the game wants you to. Usually I'd be off-put by such a sudden loss of freedom, but it honestly does wonders to keep the experience more airtight with less wiggle room for things to go wrong. This game also does a lot more with the art style. There were very few moments in Security Breach that even remotely resembled horror to me. Ruin, however? It's dark, it's grimy, everything is rusting and falling apart. There's atmosphere here. Something to put you on the edge. There's no life in the party here, only death for those who venture. Everything you go through is an effective rearrangement of the base game. The immediate improvement is autosaving here. You're not going to get sent back miles if you fail, thankfully. It's a relatively comfortable checkpoint system that almost springs to life too often, but I get it after how Security Breach handled it to steer the other direction with saving so hard. The animatronics are the same here too, just with time passed since Gregory broke them down and the building shutting off. The ruined animatronics, as they're now called, look far more haunting than the just broken versions we had before. Add in a little foreshadowing here and there and some pretty solid scares too. Like all the claw marks and the fence being broken through at the bottom just to be met with a crawling Monty. The main gimmick this time is the mask, the Vanny mask, that's essentially hacker vision. It lets you see things you couldn't, walk through doors and walls that you shouldn't, and in general are a huge tool for puzzle solving whilst trying to survive. To stop you from being in hacker mode 24/7, however, there's something in the data space, and if you can see it, it can see you. This is the MXES, or the Mexus. When the mask is up, it will effectively figure out where you are and start approaching. If it reaches you, it'll jump scare you, disable the mask for a time, and summon an animatronic if one is near it, where they'll then likely kill you. It is another threat that teleports the actual threat to you, but it's infinitely more in the player's control because you can just take the damn mask off to recoup whenever needed. Some of the puzzles you solve are reflective of similar things you did in Security Breach. Easy example being that early on you visit the sun and moon in the daycare again. It's already dark, so it's moon out to kill whoever enters. But this time, there's only 2 generators instead of 5, but you have to go into the Vanny mask to navigate, which will put Mixus into the play park with you alongside Moon. Once you turn both generators on, you reboot Sun and Moon instead, making them merge into one being now named Eclipse, who thanks Cassie and brings you to the same door Sun once kicked Gregory out of, so you can proceed. It took a foundation from the previous iteration and expanded on it in a minor way that made you approach the whole thing differently, and mirrored the ending of the sequence with a positive end instead of a negative one. The fact that I immediately turned around afterwards to see the Weeping Angel endos put the fear of God back into me, but even this works a little different. One moved freely in Vanny mode, but never moved when out of it, until it saw me in Vanny mode, or at least I think that's how it came to life. Then it was the Weeping Angel I knew and feared. In fact, I got honest to God jump scared by one that wasn't doing an actual jump at one point, so thanks for that. If I had to criticize something, they do the central node that requires you to find the smaller ones to hack first routine a little too often. You come to a new area, see the wires in Vanny mode, and just get to business finding them again. It's not a bad side activity at all, just if it was used a little more sparingly, it probably would have been more enjoyable as the game went on. They would at least mix things up on occasion to add to the pressure, like eventually Mixus puts these jammers in place that either lock you in or lock you out of Vanny mode, so you're forced to either lose access to some of your abilities or permanently allow Mixus to pursue you. But still, once you've solved a few of them, you know what you're in for each time. Monty eventually reaches his end in a bit of poetic justice. There's a few hints in Ruin that Monty replaced Bonnie specifically in the crew, and his last section is him underwater with you having to jump between boxes so he doesn't catch you, ending in you turning on some electronics to fry him. A lighting rig outlining Bonnie is what gets him, one likely thrown out when Monty took over, as if the bunny got the last laugh. To be honest, I also didn't completely realise that I'd gotten a smidge attached to Himbo Glamrock Freddy until I saw his fate later on. I felt Freddy in Security Breach was just okay, but he was still the only consistent friend we had in that game, so it did suck to see him end up in arguably the worst state of them all. But if you want to talk about animatronics I felt the most for, it's Roxy. Roxy's personal story throughout Security Breach and Ruin felt like it got the most attention in writing compared to the others. I know that's not saying much, as she only had a small handful of scenes, but in contrast, Monty doesn't offer much, ever, and Chica is just kind of the foodie of the group. Roxy has noticeable self-esteem issues. She puts up a wall and pretends she's perfect, then cries the moment no one's looking. She then gets completely blinded, and it emotionally destroys her. Yet even when she's at her lowest and is crumbling at the seams, you get this little scene.
Your special day. I remember. Your special day. Do you still like carrot cake? It has been some time since I saw you last. If I remember correctly, it is on the 11th. I remember because you are number 1. Twice. Have you booked your party? I'm sure your friends will show up this time. Cassie? What are you doing?
Sorry.
I love carrot cake. Happy birthday, Cassie.
Fox. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry.
Even at her worst, she puts up a brave face, comforts Cassie, and shows she remembered her from a previous birthday party. Chica was my favourite animatronic of the classic games, but Steel Wool really made me care about this robot wolf girl. I know what franchise this is, so I was never expecting a happy ending, but man, I hope they make up some way to bring her back later on, to at least give her closure to this as a full arc, as opposed to just these little snippets that end in tragedy. But at the end of the road and absolute depths of the Pizzaplex where we had our unique final boss last time, we find a deeper darkness beneath that. A huge security system that was powering Mexus. Shut it off, blow open the concrete cage Gregory was trapped in, and...
You saved me! You saved me.
Gregory?
I'm Gregory.
You're not Gregory. What are you?
I'm Gregory.
Get out of here! Run!
All we achieved here was setting the Mimic free. Roxy thankfully survived and bails us out, but to stop the Mimic from getting free, the real Gregory drops Cassie from her elevator to her doom, ending Ruin. This was a pretty solid DLC, and like the classic saga, the second entry teased our new main antagonist. FNaF 2 teased William Afton, Ruin teases the Mimic. It might be a stretch, but I choose to believe the William we fought in Security Breach was actually the Mimic too. Don't know why he'd mimic Afton, but I don't think Steelwall knew either when they made that game. I know there are alternative endings too, but I think this is the one they'll go with moving forward, especially as it sounds like some of the supernatural might be coming back in the future considering what's left of Roxy finds Cassie at the end. Maybe they really will get a continued story then. All in all, Ruin is a sweet, short DLC that does a lot to remedy the main game it's attached to's problem and ultimately deliver a fun, linear experience. But now that we've met our new villain, it's time to get to know it.
Cassie.
It's funny that the most recent entry as of writing this is also set the earliest in the timeline, with some time in the 1970s here. So before William Afton and before the Bites, we're Arnold, a comically overworked employee for Fazbear Entertainment, sent on one last shift to pick up Fazbear property from Murray's Costume Manor. In particular, they want the schematics for the Mimic from the executive office so they can figure out how to stop it firstly, but secondly, how they can use the information to make more helpful machines in the future. Considering this is a prequel and we just saw it pursue us in Ruin, we already know how this isn't going to be a success story, but we'll get there. The first thing I noticed is the game is a lot more physically involved. You don't just press a button, you have to manually slide doors, twist devices, pull or spin cranks. I know it's probably more intended for VR support, but I like it for the horror aspect, making something mundane require a bit more focus so when you're under pressure, you're likely to slip up. Once you're inside and you spent some time in the entrance getting more introduced to the building, you're in and given the breakdown of your main objective. You have effectively an electric key. What you need will require you to upgrade the key, and so is the incentive to enter increasingly hostile situations to get it. In fact, the game wastes no time letting you know that most of this game is a 1v1 similar to FNaF 3. Just Arnold and the Mimic. The Mimic will inhabit the costumes in the building, take on a piece of their personality whilst using it to hunt you down. A fight, like always, that you'll lose if it catches you. From here, the game has a formula that is a bit more rigid compared to the previous game, but it's used excellently to push it forward. What I mean is, if we break it down into chapters, every chapter starts in the security office and a new door you can open. In chapter 1, you also need a crank to open a door, which becomes a small introduction to more of the mechanics, as you have a storage box you can take the crank from. You use it and encounter the Mimic that is seeking you out, so you have to lure or distract it to get by. Once you find your way around it, you meet what I'm calling the boss monster of the chapter. In chapter 1, it's Jackie, which doesn't have much going on, but since you're still in the tutorial, it makes sense. You'll usually have a bigger encounter with them involving more puzzle solving mixed with quick thinking. For Jackie, it's just taking the crank off its jack in the box to use on a door instead. A soft repurposing of a previous action. Once you're done, you get the main boss fight, which are almost always chase sequences. You will eventually come out on top, the boss monster destroyed, and you're back in the security office with a new level on your key to explore the next zone. The individual zones still have a lot to differentiate them, but they almost always share this spine of puzzle, boss monster, puzzle involving the monster, running away, new key for the next level. Although it might seem like it'd get boring, the puzzles themselves remain unique, the environments are varied, and ultimately, you're never safe anyway. The Mimic is on the name of the box for a reason. It is relentless and will always ensure you never get too comfortable. To be honest, I love the Mimic in this game because of this. You can never be too sure of where's safe because you're in a building showcasing costumes. The Mimic could be hiding in any single one of the animal suits you see, and there's dozens of them in every room. You're always having to second guess yourself as you're traveling, especially if one costume disappears from when you last saw it. Heck, once the Mimic is roaming around, there's a chance it'll eventually ditch its costume and find another one, blurring the information you had on it as now you're back to that guessing game. You have distractions you can set and hiding spots scattered too if you really need to reset and breathe, but it only ever takes one slip up for the death machine to come knocking. With how fast it is and how claustrophobic the environments are, if it gets a clear line of sight on you, it's probably over. This is the Mimic's game after all, you're just a fool who walked into its cage. I'll talk about why the Mimic became this violent force of nature later, but for now it's just a matter of constantly having to outsmart the apex predator in its own domain. You don't have to stick to just the main plot either. Although the whole game takes place in this building, that doesn't mean there aren't side rooms and optional puzzles to solve, usually leading to collectibles. I'm aware if you 100% the main collectibles list that you can get a secret ending exclusive to New Game Plus, but I will also save that for the end of the video. The only other thing to bring up whilst I'm still talking about the early game is that I was honestly surprised how quickly Jackie is done away with considering their central presence on the box art and app window. I get it, ooh, clown's scary, but still, you're done with Jackie in the opening hour. The chase sequence is nice though. I know these sequences are a staple of mascot horror nowadays, scripted sequences that you have to play as the game instructs or you have to start over, and they can work to cap off a section but should always be used sparingly as the script of the sequences becomes more obvious the more of them you do. It's always a sort of fake danger where you just do what the game tells you and you'll always win. There's no alternative play here. When that is the case, it then falls to the presentation to sell the moment, and Jackie reaching past you as you run was pretty cool. Even if basic, the levers and the vents were a nice touch too, testing how comfortable with the controls you've gotten under a more stressful situation. As you work through the building, you'll occasionally hear old recordings from someone called Fiona helping you out in automated messages, like running you through how to fix the elevator after it breaks, for example. Even without knowing the story behind her, you can at least tell she didn't want to make many of these recordings. She always sounds uncomfortable, nervous, has a shaky voice like she was just in an argument before the recording. Like it doesn't take much to figure out she was somewhat forced into making these recordings to suit the purpose of the business aesthetic. Maybe not at first, but eventually so. To have the cute young girl voice all the costume manner instructions for the employees to listen to and feel all good about themselves when they do a good job, in case it wasn't obvious enough this game took place in the 70s. It wasn't always so seemingly hostile though. There's a recording you can find early-ish into the adventure that shows how Edwin Murray, the owner of the building, first met Fiona and asked for her voice for a test on a tape recording to see if voices could be saved. It's harmless enough, so Fiona is happy to oblige. It just doesn't stay that way, but this is more of me alluding to the bigger picture, so I'll leave that for later. I haven't really talked about anything like animatronics in this game so far because it's all just the Mimic in costumes. But because it takes on the personality of whatever he mimics, the boss monsters are effectively the closest thing to our animatronic threats from the previous games. I already mentioned the Jack-in-the-Box, Jackie, but I was a huge fan of Big Top, who has you playing carnival games that grant you spins on the prize wheel. The prize being a key upgrade. Yet you'll always fail until you beat every carnival game. Yet each one you beat breaks the power and allows Big Top to start looking for you as a threat. It uses mannequins that make loud noises if you get too close to them, so it's all about quick yet careful positioning to get to the power room. Then you'll solve a puzzle under a time limit to reset the building and Big Top along with it, each time getting harder and more complicated until you finally come out on top. Big Top isn't as huge as the DJ from the last game, but it definitely carries the same vibe. You may have noticed that the mannequins tend to have numbers on the back of them too, giving you one last puzzle before you go as the door code is only told to you via the accessories the mannequins wore. From that you build your code out, but Big Top is long gone now, ready for the final chase of the chapter, which is a fun one too, putting you in a maze of corridors asking you to make quick second decisions to avoid the many arms and legs of the machine, or cheekily circle a well-placed mannequin to not alert it to your position. Arnold really wants that paycheck though, so he stays after all this if you can believe it. The third boss monster is Nurse Dolly, but before we meet her, we have to build a spring-lock animatronic suit of our own to move around in the theatre as the pirate captain. Building it gives you a slight advantage and a lesson to remember for later. The Mimic can't identify you in the suit. The way the game teaches you all of these things feels natural. They don't stop you with tutorial prompts all the time the way Security Breach could. They let you figure it out yourself. The game respects your time and intelligence, and it's honestly kind of crazy this is the same team. Similar to when I played Into the Pit, I just had unapologetic fun with this game. It was so easy to just sit down and lose an hour or two burning through a section, exploring the secrets, solving puzzles, meeting new threats that would then be well utilized. It was a fun ride with no real hiccups personally. All of these monsters were part of Edwin Murray's crazy inventions, and even if they weren't lore drops here and there to highlight how the deep end he ultimately went, you can kinda tell just from these. Dolly is attached to a rail, and part of the puzzle this time ends up with you standing on it, so it's reactionary to jump out of the way from time to time. Of course, she doesn't stay on the rail forever, making you have to be more actively evasive to get by and fill up the incinerator. Although not first introduced here, this is the section you'll become the most aware of the chains hanging from the ceiling everywhere, which I love for making you keep focused. Anything to punish players losing their cool and tunnel visioning into a free alarm for the Mimic. Her chase at the end has one of the better tracks in the game too. In fact, the whole OST for this game is pretty good when it kicks in. You spend a lot of time in silence, but anytime something picks up in the story, the music springs to life, and it's often pretty solid. Surviving Dolly finally lets you get a good look at the Mimic as it ditches the costume too, which I appreciate. They could have shown the Mimic off immediately, but no, they make you work for it, and even then you only see it for a second. Mimic steals a Chica suit next, but this isn't quite the boss monster, just a wink at presumably lore, but also because we can't have a FNaF game without the damn cupcake with eyes. Now has a very loud alert system to stop it from just dancing all the time. But it's here we learn that the Mimic has a name, M2. More on that soon, I promise. The actual boss monster is in the basement, however, and oh, why are we doing Weeping Angels again, Steelwall? Seriously, the team behind these newer games know how to make a great Weeping Angels section and keep adding them just to make sure we know that too. They're fantastic, they're terrifying, they're well paced, they're terrifying, dear God, get me out of here! No, calm down. You always explain how the threat works, it's no different. Tiger Rock here isn't 100% a Weeping Angel, but it might as well be. If you're in the light, it'll teleport around you, just out of sight for you to try and find it. If you're in the darkness, however, you have seconds before you're just dead. So it's about quick reactions and locating. If you're tense, however, you'll die a lot. I died a lot. But I think it's valid to have be significantly harder, because if you're only going for the bare minimum, this is your final boss. Now obviously I wanted the real ending, so it wasn't, but fuck, was it a good scare, and man, I hope Steel will stop having Weeping Angels. I want to sleep tonight. Look at me book out the room the moment I got a chance at the end. I was afraid. But now we're at a split in the story, I think it's time I explained why the Mimic, or M2, is the way it is. So, story time, I'll keep it short. There was once an Edwin Murray and he married Fiona, both voices you hear all the time on pre-recorded messages. They had a son called David. Edwin was an inventor and he made M2 to be a big toy and big friend to little David. However, this is the FNaF series, and if it isn't killing a child every hour, something's gone wrong, so David dies in a car crash. Fiona was dead too from what seemed like a workplace accident, but I couldn't really tell. So Edwin was all alone with M2. Except M2, being what it is, was mimicking the last thing it remembered at the time. It was mimicking the man's dead son. Edwin threw into a rage and attacked the machine, breaking its legs. M2 learned violence from this and eventually it mimicked it. M2 is the violent death machine it is because of what it learned. It can get what it wants with the violence it mimics from the past. The only mystery left is the game's title. What is the secret of the Mimic? Well, you might have already guessed, but we need to get there first. The dispatch caller that's been helping us wasn't actually our dispatch at all, but a familiar trick we experienced in Ruin. Disobeying and activating a secret program lets us go far below the building to reveal a prototype pizzeria. The Mimic is here, and we get one of the most creative puzzles a game like this could have given us. We need to get into the office of this pizzeria. Not too unlike the animatronics were in the originals. In fact, that's the puzzle. Around are rusty metal old spring-locked suits, all representing animatronics. You can find very early designs of the OG 4 too, but for the suits and this puzzle it works as follows. You get near one of the security doors and it will close and burn some of the power to the building. The puzzle is positioning all the suits to force every door to close so all the power gets used up, just like how the gang were to the player in FNaF 1. It's genuinely a great puzzle that only a game from this series could pull off in such a fitting way. And considering, once again, this is the most recent entry in the series and the end of my journey through the main games, this felt like a real nice full circle moment for me before getting the real truth. The secret of the Mimic is that there's two of them. Well, one's the humanoid death machine M2, but Edwin tried to recreate his dead wife first. M1 is Fiona. M1 is the one talking to you all game long. She doesn't realize Edwin was murdered by M2 long ago and still desperately hopes this situation can be resolved if we go to Edwin's house on the hill nearby to repair M2 and stop its endless rampage. It's a cool twist, especially because the machine that Fiona has become is the same one that later powered Mixis in Ruin. She's been trying to stop M2 for decades. Thus begins the final battle, in the Murray house. M2 is hunting you down within, but you need to find 5 video recordings and play them to get numbers for a code. That code being your victory condition. The recordings are color-coded and David's name is written in the order of the colors you need to build the code. Apparently the numbers are randomized per playthrough too, so you have to engage with it fully, you can't just skip it. Secret of the Mimic might be the most puzzle-centric game in the series, but I honestly like this approach a lot to the game's design. I think it suits the modern games like a glove, considering the nature of the originals were also effective puzzles at times. For anyone curious, my door code was 63154. With that, we get Cradle.exe, our ticket to resetting M2. But it's not about to let us just activate it, so it's time to escape, leading to one last chase sequence to send off this genuinely great experience. We burn the place down and get out of Dodge just in time for 6 AM. We made it, and with the Cradle.exe in our possession, we can put a stop to M2 for good. But, of course, let's not forget, this is a prequel. We already knew how this was going to end. I'm aware of the secret New Game Plus ending where you can actually make M2 become like David again, but considering Ruin exists, it likely isn't canon. More just a showcase that M2 can be altered to give the player future knowledge in a presumable sequel. I know I kinda just explained the whole game in the end, but I want to stress it's because I was just loving the whole experience. It was hard to really find any real faults in it other than the checkpoints were a smidge too generous at times. Like, they pop one per step of a core objective, and it took some of the tension out, sure, but I felt the game was well balanced around those checkpoints to always keep you focused. My absolute favourite thing about this game was the Mimic though, M2 itself. I love that it's a machine that craved humanity that eventually responded to the abuse it was given, like a mirror to William Afton before him, who was a human who became like a machine. A perfect follow-up villain to such an iconic previous antagonist. I can't wait to see where this goes for the Mimic and those who try to stop it. All in all, I loved this game. I don't know which I prefer between this and Into the Pit, but both of these games are a sign of what to expect, then, well, consider me excited for the future.
Where do you think you're going?
I am very much a fan of this series now, from the originals to the spin-offs to the sequel series. There's been highs and lows, but the lowest point didn't stop me and the highest genuinely got me invested. My favourite is a tie between Into the Pit and Secret of the Mimic, but I'll put my whole list of favourites to least on screen now. I'm going to assume FNaF Fetch will be next from the Into the Pit team, and then after that the next Mimic game. I'm not sure exactly what I'd want from the next Steel Ball game. If they wanted to try security breaches style again, maybe we could be Cassie with Roxy as the supporting role, and have it lean more into the paranormal aspect, since it was basically completely absent from the current era, going instead for pure sci-fi horror instead. Like Cassie might be dead and become infused with Roxy through her soul, for example. I know Gregory took Glamrock Freddy's head with him in one of the endings, so maybe something could go crazy with that too from an older Gregory. We'll have to see. Gameplay-wise, I'd personally love a classic Resident Evil-styled game with some Metroidvania elements. Although the jump scares into game overs are iconic for the series, I wouldn't mind one offering a vague health bar similar to something like My Friendly Neighborhood to boot. But I wouldn't be surprised if the next game is also more like Secret the Mimic, but I'm rambling now. I'm not sure if I'll review each game moving forward as they come out, or wait till a few are out and bundle them up again, but we'll see as and when they come out. I know there's a kart racer spin-off coming that might be fun, but we'll have to see what time brings. As a whole though, this has been a wild ride from start to finish, and although I'm a little FNaF'd out for the time being, I look forward to whatever comes next, and I'll probably play them as they release moving forward. Either way, thank you all so much for watching. Consider checking out my older reviews if you enjoyed. I know I said I was going to take a break after the last video, but a mixture of genuinely being up for playing these games and having internet issues for a while stopping me from doing much else, it just made sense to burn through it and get it done. I'm not completely sure what I want to do next yet, but regardless, I hope to see you all again soon. Take care everyone. Peace.